Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. San Diego has long been a city of secrets, with whispers echoing off buildings, creeping into dark alleyways, and lingering like ghosts in underground tunnels. It is a place where treachery flourishes in the dark. Last Friday, I found myself with a secret that had the potential to ruin everything. It all began with a text message, not mine, but hers. "Can you arrive earlier? I cannot wait to see you again." The words sprung out at me from the screen of my wife's phone. I'd found it by accident. Rachel had left her phone open on the kitchen counter while hurrying to the bedroom to get her suitcase. We had been married for 8 years, through laughing, disagreements, and what I believed was unshakable trust. But at that moment, faith cracked like a fragile vase on the ground. My heartbeat quickened as I scanned through the texts. The sender's name was Liam, yet the chat seemed unprofessional. There were mentions of hotel rooms, late-night meetings, and an unnerving degree of closeness that no workplace should experience. Then came the ultimate blow, a confirmation of their upcoming rendezvous at the Ocean Crest Hotel that evening. Rachel walked back into the kitchen, completely ignorant of the tempest erupting within me. She kissed me on the cheek as usual, took her keys, and said, "I'm going out for dinner with some colleagues. Don't wait up." "Sure," I answered, my voice calm and steady. I didn't reveal that I knew, not yet. As the door clicked shut behind her, I slumped into a chair, looking at the screen as if it were a ticking bomb. Betrayal has a way of stopping time. My mind rushed back to the life we'd created, the late evenings spent fantasizing about the future, the promises we'd made, and now here she was, meeting someone else in a hotel bar while I sat at home, completely surprised. I considered approaching her immediately but decided against it. That was too straightforward and easy. It would allow her the opportunity to explain, distort the facts, and weep her way out of it. No, I needed more. I wanted her to experience the same crushing anguish that she had inflicted on me. And concepts started to shape. Step 1. Discover who Liam truly was. A fast social media search told me all I needed to know. Liam Harris, a wealthy corporate lawyer, enjoyed sharing images of his opulent lifestyle. Rachel stood behind him at what seemed to be a corporate gala. My stomach churned at seeing them together, but then I spotted something else, a lady standing next to Liam. Her arm was linked to his, small with silky brown hair, a strong jawline, and a polished grin that screamed San Diego elite. His wife's name was Emily Harris. For a little while, I paused. Dragging someone else into this mess seems terrible, but the more I considered it, the more reasonable it seemed. Emily needed to know the truth about her husband, and I deserved punishment for Rachel's falsehoods. The following morning, I stood outside Liam Harris high-rise in Laguna Beach, a fortress of glass and steel where opulent lifestyles survive behind locked doors. I took advantage of the opportunity when Emily strolled out, dressed in a stylish trench coat and carrying a leather bag. "Excuse me, Emily Harris," I said, keeping my tone courteous. She came to a standstill, the harsh click of her heels reverberating over the pavement. "Yes? Do I know you?" "No," I said steadily, "but we do have something in common. Our spouses." Her brows narrowed, and bewilderment flashed over her features. "I'm sorry, I don't follow. Your husband, Liam, and my wife, Rachel." I lifted my phone to show the damning text exchanges. "I think we need to talk." Her face paled as she read the texts. I thought she was going to swoon, but she straightened herself, fingers gripping around the strap of her bag. "Are you certain?" she said, her voice shaking. "Positive," I affirm. "I'm not here to cause a scene, just to make sure you know." Silence stretched between us as she gazed at the screen, astonished. Then, as if a switch was flicked, a hard resolution settled over her face. "Do you have a plan?" she said coldly. That's when I realized I had underestimated her. Emily was not one to give up under pressure. She retaliated. "Yes," I said, my thoughts racing. "And it involves you." She raised her eyebrow. "Go on, I'm listening." We spent the following hour at a neighboring cafe, discussing our next steps over lattes and shared grief. By the time we departed, our strategy was obvious, precise, and devastating, almost enough to make me feel sorry for Rachel and Liam. Later that evening, Emily and I were standing outside the Ocean Crest Hotel's magnificent entryway. The enormous glass doors mirrored Laguna Beach's sparkling skyline. Emily adjusted her trench coat, her fingers quivering slightly. I couldn't tell whether it was anxiety or wrath that drove her, but we were in this together now. Are you sure about this? She said, her voice leveled despite the anxiety building around us. I've never been more sure, I said confidently. Let's see how they handle being blindsided. Our idea seemed basic, yet it was executed with perfection. We weren't simply going to confront them. We were there to flip their lives upside down. If Rachel and Liam felt they could cheat in private, it was time to put them under the sharpest glare possible. As we walked in, the bar's golden lighting shed a luxurious shine over everything. The air was dense with the aroma of expensive perfume, newly poured martinis, and the low buzz of whispered discussions. Emily moved with experienced ease, as if she belonged in this area, while I tried not to feel like an imposter. Our targets were simple to find. Rachel and Liam sat together at a corner booth, leaning close. Rachel wore a crimson dress that I'd never seen before, and it clung to her physique in an unsettling manner. Liam, with his slicked-back hair and fancy suit, placed his hand casually on her leg. They were in their own universe, quietly chuckling over shared secrets. Emily paused suddenly, her lips squeezed into a narrow line. "Look at them," she said under her breath, acting like the perfect couple. Her comments brought me out of my daze. "Ready?" I inquired. She stood up tall, her eyes determined. "Let's do this." We approached their table with careful steps. Rachel's grin wavered as soon as she noticed me, and her eyes widened in surprise. She opened her lips, as if to speak, but no words emerged. Liam, unaware of her response, turned his head nonchalantly and froze as he spotted Emily. "Liam," Emily murmured calmly, slipping effortlessly into the seat next him. "Mind if we join you for a drink?" Rachel hardly had time to respond before I moved in next to her, close enough to smell her perfume's flowery overtones. "Are you surprised to see me, sweetheart?" I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Rachel's mouth expanded and closed like a fish panting for oxygen. "I thought you were at home," she said anxiously, fumbling with the hem of her dress. I said icily. But then I had this strange feeling I was missing out on something. Turns out I was right. Liam, anxious to retake control, leaned forward Emily. "Emily, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can," she said forcefully. "You've always been good with words, Liam. It's your actions that I take issue with." Several heads had already turned in our way. The peaceful hum in the pub dissipated as curiosity spread like wildfire. Rachel's gaze darted around anxiously. "Can we not do this here?" she demanded. "Why not?" I said, increasing my voice slightly to garner more attention. "You didn't seem to mind being here with him." Emily folded her arms and leaned back in her seat. "Isn't it funny?" she said coldly. "Sneaking around, thinking you're so clever. Did it never cross your minds that secrets have a way of coming to light?" Liam's jaw tightened and his face hardened. "If you want to talk about this, Emily, let's do it in private." She smiled sharply, without amusement. "Oh no, Liam. Privacy is a luxury you forfeited the moment you brought your affair to a public place. So go ahead, enlighten us. How did it all start?" The tension was suffocating. Rachel seemed to want to collapse into the floor, as Liam strained for words that wouldn't come. Emily finally broke the stillness with a slow, sarcastic clap. "Wow," she drawled. Liam Harris, speechless. "Now that's a historic moment. I should record this." A few close customers laughed discreetly. Liam's face flushed scarlet, and Rachel seemed on the edge of tears. "Good," I thought. "Let them squirm." Rachel reaches for her handbag. "I think we've overstayed our welcome," she grumbled. "Leaving so soon?" I obstructed her escape. "What's the rush? You looked pretty comfortable just 5 minutes ago." Liam sprang to his feet, his chair scrapping noisily against the floor. "This is ridiculous, Emily. Let's go." But she didn't move. Instead, she leaned forward and locked gazes with him. "No, Liam. You can go. I'm staying right here." Liam paused, obviously uncertain what to do. Rachel gave me a begging look, but I kept my stance. This was their disaster, and they were now beginning to suffer the consequences. As they lurched toward the exit, murmurs followed them like breadcrumbs. Emily and I relaxed back in our chairs, triumphant, but this was just the start. Later that night, the adrenaline from the encounter had not subsided. Emily and I sat in my darkly lit living room, a bottle of whiskey between us, discussing our future moves. "This can't just be about embarrassing them," she said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. Her eyes glowed with hatred, just like mine. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Make them feel the kind of pain they inflicted on us." She was correct. The public humiliation had been pleasurable, but it was insufficient. Rachel and Liam's treachery had left wounds too deep to be healed in a single meeting. No, we wanted something greater, something that would leave them stunned long after we were finished. I slumped back in my chair, looking at the ceiling as my thoughts started to shift. What if we turned their little affair against them? I said, a tinge of vindication in my voice. Use it as a weapon. Emily arched her brow, curious. Go on. Think about it, I said, leaning forward as my notion gathered traction. Liam's a big-shot lawyer, right? Someone with a reputation to protect. And Rachel, she's built her entire life on this image of being the perfect wife and mother. What happens when we expose them for who they really are? Emily's lips formed a slow, sinister grin. You're talking about going public? Not just public, I added, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Controlled. Precise. We don't just throw this out there. We craft it. Make sure the story hits all the right nerves. We spent hours methodically mapping out every element of our strategy. Emily had access to Liam's private accounts, but I had previously seen Rachel's emails and messages. We had accumulated a wealth of evidence between the two of us, including images, texts, and even receipts from their covert meetings. By the end, the living room floor resembled a murder scene, scattered with printouts and scrawled notes. Emily tapped her pen across the coffee table's edge carefully. We've got the evidence. Now where do we strike? I stopped before responding. Liam's firm, I stated firmly. He's got a lot of pull there, big cases, high-profile clients. What do you think happens when this lands on his boss' desk? Emily's eyes expanded slightly. It could ruin him. Exactly, I said, a keen edge of vindication coming into my tone. And Rachel? She thrives on her social circles. Those PDA meetings, her perfect little suburban bubble. What happens when all of that comes crashing down? Emily remained silent for a few moments. Then she raised her glass, a malicious light in her eyes. To burning it all down. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of optimism. It wasn't simply about vengeance anymore. It was about regaining what had been stolen from us. The following morning, I awoke early, the weight of our plan pushing hard on my chest. Emily, who had collapsed on the sofa after we finished the whiskey, seemed tranquil as she drank coffee, the beautiful morning light highlighting her sharp features. I sent the email, she said nonchalantly, without looking up. My heart skips a beat. To who? Liam's boss, she said matter-of-factly. I attached everything, texts, photos, even the receipts. It's done. I breathed slowly, the severity of our deeds washing over me. And Rachel? Emily said, laying down her phone. That part's yours. You know her world better than I do. She was correct. Rachel's whole life focused on preserving her beautiful image, the ideal wife, adoring mother, and the lady everyone adored at the neighborhood barbecue. Destroying that picture would take precision, but I was prepared. I took out my laptop and started writing an email that would go to every PDA member, neighbor, and common acquaintance we had. Subject line? Emily inquired, looking over my shoulder. I smirked. How about a betrayal close to home? She gave a quiet laugh. Savage. It did not take long to compile the email. The evidence spoke for itself, creating a clear picture that no one could dispute. When I pushed send, I felt a peculiar sense of tranquility. There was no going back now. By lunchtime, the repercussions had already started. Emily's phone rang with a message from one of Liam's coworkers. He's been called into the office, she continued, displaying the screen to me. The partners aren't happy. Good, I muttered, a chilly contentment sinking into my chest. That's just the beginning. Meanwhile, Rachel was inundated with calls and messages from her pals. I knew because she kept attempting to contact me. Her name flashed across my phone every few minutes. I didn't respond. Allow her to stew in her terror. She deserved everything of it. As the sun went down, Emily and I sat back in the living room, watching the carnage develop like spectators at a car accident. It was ugly, terrible, and just what they deserved. But the night hadn't ended. There was still one more stage in the plan, the most intimate one yet. Emily and I were engulfed in the cool night air as we strolled into the center of San Diego, the city's pulse pulsing all around us. Lights flashed from towering high-rises, while a street musician on the corner played soothing saxophone notes. It should have been a quiet night, but my thoughts was churning like a maelstrom. Tonight was about the ultimate move, the one that would bring everything together. Emily had spent the day tying up loose threads at her side. Liam had been called to an obligatory meeting at his business, and according to her source, the partners were furious. The controversy what started was poisonous, and Liam's reputation had quickly become a liability. His demise was impending. Rachel, meantime, was disintegrating in real time. My phone was inundated with her urgent calls and frantic messages, each voicemail more terrified than the previous. Please, I need to talk to you. I don't know what's happening. Everyone's turning on me. The neighbors, the PTA, they've all seen something. I don't know what you did, but please call me. I erased all messages without hesitation. Hearing her voice simply made me angry. Are you sure she'll show up? Emily questioned as we went along a quieter street. Oh, she'll come, I said firmly. People like Rachel will do anything to claw back control when they feel it slipping away. Would plan to meet Rachel and Liam at an upmarket restaurant in Westwood, a neutral location where the four of us could sit down and converse. They had no clue what awaited them. Rachel liked the restaurant's white tablecloths, cozy environment, and impression of exclusivity, which made her feel important. I booked the hotel under my name, knowing it would entice her like a moth to a flame. When we arrived, Rachel and Liam were already sitting, their expressions pallid and tight. They no longer resembled the glamorous power couple they appeared to be, just two individuals clinging to the side of a sinking ship. Rachel's eyes flashed to mine as I approached, a mixture of fear and wrath flashing over her face. Logan, what's going on? She said, her voice shaking. Liam attempted to hide his anxiety with indifference. Emily, he said stiffly, pointing to her. I didn't think you'd stoop this low. Stoop? Emily chuckled fiercely as she sank into her seat. That's rich, coming from a man who stooped so low he could touch the earth's core. I sat across from Rachel and leaned back in my chair, watching her squirm. Relax, I answered calmly. We're just here to clear the air. This isn't a courtroom, Martin said sharply. If you've got something to say, just say it. Emily went inside her purse, pulled out a hefty folder, and dropped it on the table with a theatrical thud. Gladly, she said, turning it open. Let's start with the emails, shall we? Rachel's cheeks flushed scarlet as Emily started reading aloud the damning letters she and Liam had exchanged. Each statement was a knife, piercing through the carefully maintained facade they'd fought so hard to keep. The restaurant's quiet setting made their pain much more delightful, eliciting inquisitive stares from surrounding customers. You need to stop, Rachel murmured, her voice low and terrified. People are staring. Let them, I said softly. They deserve to see who you really are. Liam's rage boiled as he slapped his fist against the table. This is harassment. You think you can just humiliate us and walk away? Emily's grin seemed almost predatory. Oh, we're not walking away, she replied pleasantly. We're just getting started. A waiter approached politely yet warily. Is everything all right here? Perfectly fine, I said in a cheerful tone. Just a family discussion. The waiter nodded uncomfortably before leaving us to our verbal sparring. Rachel's hand shook as she attempted to remain calm. Logan, she implored, her voice breaking. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Then explain it to me, I said, leaning forward. Explain how sneaking around behind my back was part of some grand plan. She opened her lips, but no words emerged. Rachel was absolutely at a loss. Emily took the chance. You know what I find interesting? She said, turning to Liam. How fast your little empire is crumbling. Do you think your clients will stick around when they see the photos? Liam's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. Emily shrugged lazily. Wouldn't I? Silence settled across the table, thick and stifling. Rachel's tearful eyes greeted me. Logan, please, she begged urgently. We can fix this. I shook my head, all last feelings of affection for her fading. No, Rachel. You broke it. Now you get to live with the pieces. Emily and I went out of the restaurant together, the cold night air sweeping over us. For a time, none of us spoke. The stillness between us was comfortable and filled with victory. Do you think they got the message? Emily said, a teasing grin pulling at the corner of her mouth. Oh, they got it, I told her. But it's far from over. What they didn't realize was that the ultimate blow was already in motion. The aftermath from our altercation at the restaurant was immediate and spectacular. Rachel and Liam were in full panic mode, their idyllic lives crumbling faster than they could handle. But for Emily and me, it was merely the prelude to the true endgame, the play that would hurt harder than they had thought. It all started with a telephone call. The morning following, I had done a lot of research before collaborating with Emily, revealing more than simply Liam's involvement with Rachel. Behind his polished image as a top lawyer lied a trail of dubious practices, including diverted client monies, under-the-table deals, and a few suspiciously skewed case decisions. I wasn't the only one who wanted to see his collapse. A former paralegal at his business, who is now freelancing, was eager to tell her tale. I gave Emily everything, and she didn't hesitate. "This isn't just personal anymore," she said with a glint in her eye. "This is justice." While Emily demolished Liam's career, I was quietly causing havoc in Rachel's social circle. The emails ID written to her friends and neighbors were just the beginning. The PDA, her social haven, was alive with rumors about her romance. One especially cruel mother even disseminated rumors that Rachel was engaged with more than simply Liam. It was false, but I didn't care. Allow her to experience the sting of criticism from the same people she hoped to impress. The piece de resistance, however, came from a surprising twist. "I have an idea," Emily remarked one night, her voice low and excited. "But it's a bit unconventional." I raised an eyebrow. "Unconventional? How?" She leaned forward, a cheeky smirk on her lips. "We invite them to a party together." I blinked. "The four of us, in the same room?" "Exactly," she said with a cheeky smile. "Not just any party, a gala. Something public, where they'll be forced to smile and play nice while we pull the rug out from under them." The concept was ridiculous. Reckless, even. But it was also great. "Let's do it," I nodded, a grin forming on my lips. The gala was a high-profile charity event held at an affluent location in downtown San Diego, a black-tie celebration brimming with high-society elegance. Liam and Rachel would not dare to miss such an occasion, especially if they sensed a trap. We assured their presence via Emily's contacts and my persuasion. On the night of the event, Emily and I came together, prepared to kill. She looked stunning in a sleek black gown, while I opted for a crisp-fitted tuxedo instead of my usual casual attire. If we were going to play this game, we wanted to do it in style. It didn't take long to find them near the bar. Liam and Rachel's grins were forced and thin as they mixed with the throng. They seemed to be a polished power couple, but I could see fissures behind their mask. Rachel's eyes darted frantically around the room, and Liam's jaw was so tense I thought it would break. Emily whispered, "Showtime," as we approached them. "Liam," Emily said cheerfully, her voice full of false affection. "So good to see you." "And Rachel, don't you look stunning tonight?" Rachel froze at the sight of us, and her grin faded. The fissures were growing, and we were just getting started. Emily's grin remained razor-sharp as she casually approached Liam. "What's wrong?" she inquired calmly. "Uncomfortable being the center of attention?" Rachel's voice cracked as she said, "What are you doing here?" "Oh, we wouldn't miss this for the world," I said calmly. "A night of glamour, charity, and revelations. What's not to love?" Liam clenched his teeth as he looked at us. "Haven't you done enough?" "Not quite," Emily said, her voice piercing like glass. "You see, tonight is special, a real celebration." Rachel frowned. "Celebration of what?" "Exposure," I murmured, moving closer. "Shall we make a toast?" Before they could respond, Emily made a slight gesture to the event host near the stage. Moments later, a floodlight shone over the room, and the host's booming voice resonated over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said, "may I have your attention, please?" The audience grew hushed, their gaze drawn to the stage. Liam and Rachel exuded tension, their nerves strung tight. "Would like to take a moment to recognize a distinguished guest," the presenter said, his tone upbeat but tinged with overtones. "Mr. Liam Harris, please join us on stage." Liam froze, his face losing color. Rachel's hand went out and grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said hurriedly. However, it was already too late. The throng parted, with a sea of judging looks centered on Liam as he hesitantly moved forward. Emily and I followed, walking slowly and deliberately. The host grinned widely. "Liam, your reputation precedes you. But tonight, we're here to share a different story." A big screen fell from the ceiling. Within seconds, a slideshow started playing, including photographs of Liam and Rachel in personal, compromising situations such as hotel suites, romantic meals, and clandestine kisses. Gasps reverberated across the room, swiftly turning into murmurs and quiet fury. Rachel's face flushed scarlet as tears ran down her cheeks, smearing her mascara in heavy tracks. Liam stood still, pale, and plainly terrified. Emily came closer to him, her voice quiet but angry. "This is what happens when you think you're untouchable." As the photos continued to scroll across the screen, scandalized gasps filled the crowd. "Is that his mistress?" Someone said close. I thought she was married, too, another voice whispered. And Liam Harris, of all people? What a disgrace. Liam shuddered with each sight, his composure slipping. Rachel clutched to him, her eyes wide with fright and tears streaming freely. Please, Rachel pulled on his sleeve. We have to leave, she hurriedly muttered. Liam's mouth remained set, as if he was attempting to collect the strength to save some kind of dignity, but it was futile. Their once perfect world has been wrecked beyond repair. I moved closer to Rachel, keeping my voice low but forceful. Running won't change anything. Everyone knows now. Her tear-filled eyes met mine, raw and desperate. Please, Logan, she implored, her voice cracking. You don't have to do this. I made a mistake, okay? I was weak, but it didn't mean anything. I still love you. I sneered, my tone filled with contempt. You don't get to talk about love, Rachel. Not after everything you've done. Emily moved closer, her steely eyes fixed on Liam. And you, she added angrily, her voice breaking through the whispers surrounding us. Do you even realize what you've destroyed? Your career, your reputation, your marriage, it's all gone, just like that. Liam caught her gaze momentarily, and I felt he may lash out. Instead, he remained there, dejected, his shoulders dropping with the weight of his shame. I never meant to hurt you, he said slowly, his voice empty. Emily gave a sour, humorless chuckle. You didn't mean to hurt me? You lied. You made a mockery of our marriage. And now you're sorry? Liam averted his eyes, feeling the tension. The presenter returned to the stage with a hoarse voice. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps it's time to move on to the next part of the evening. The throng started to disperse, but whispered murmurs and lingering eyes followed Liam and Rachel. Without waiting for the night to conclude, they slipped out silently, heads low, avoiding the other guests' glances. Emily and I watched them go, a weird sensation of accomplishment settling over us. Later, back at my flat, the energy that had propelled us through the evening evaporated, replaced with a tired weight. We sat in the living room, sipping glasses of bourbon, the weight of our accomplishments crushing down on us. They deserved it, Emily said firmly after a lengthy pause. I nodded and stared into my glass. Yeah, they did. But even as I said it, a peculiar emptiness settled in. Even while the payback was wonderful, it did not eliminate the sorrow. It had not reversed the treachery or eased the pain. Rachel's tear-stained, frantic expression stayed in my head, and I despised that some part of me still cared. You're thinking about her, Emily said gently. I did not bother refuting it. I don't know why, I acknowledged. After everything, I should hate her. And I do. But it's complicated. She nodded, comprehension flashing across her eyes. It's hard to let go of someone you loved, even when they've destroyed you. We sat in quiet, the weight of our anguish hanging between us. Eventually, Emily broke the silence. So, what's next for you? She said kindly. I sighed softly and placed my drink down. Divorce, for starters. I've already got a lawyer. After that, focus on work, I guess. Try to rebuild. And Rachel? I let out a breath. Not my problem anymore, I responded, but the words seemed empty. What about you? I said, directing the question back to her. She paused, her eyes falling to her hands. Same. Divorce, starting over. Maybe even leaving San Diego. There's too much history here. I scrutinized her, seeing the fissures behind her controlled exterior. We were both shattered in different ways, two individuals stuck in the aftermath of betrayal. However, there was something strangely comfortable about confronting it together. Starting over, I remarked, lifting my glass. A tiny grin tugged on her lips as she clinked her glass against mine. To starting over. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the previous weeks played out in my head in an unending loop. The lies, the confrontations, and the consequences. The storm had finally gone, leaving behind an unusually peaceful aftermath. I had no idea what the future contained, but one thing was certain: Rachel, Liam, or anybody else would never bring me down again. The game was ended, and this time, I had won. The dust settled in the days after the gala, but Rachel and Liam's lives had been irreparably harmed. Their affair was no longer a secret. It was well known, and the consequences were catastrophic. Liam's legal firm lost no time in releasing a statement on his extended leave of absence, thereby cutting all ties with him. Whispers of financial malfeasance spread, fueled by the evidence Emily and I obtained. His name had become poisonous, banned throughout San Diego's elite circles. Liam Harris' downfall was fast, harsh, and, frankly, well-deserved. Rachel's world fell just as completely. She used to look down on high society mothers, but now they shun her. Their judgment was harsh and severe. Her acquaintances became distant, her social schedule dwindled, and the neighborhood seemed to shrink around her. Her meticulously managed existence was vanished, leaving just a crushing quiet. A week after the event, Rachel showed up at my flat. I hadn't seen her since that night, and seeing her standing in the corridor seemed weird. She seemed weak, a mere shell of the lady I once knew. Her eyes were red from weeping, and her makeup was smudged, as if she hadn't slept in days. "Logan," she said gently, her voice shaking. "Can we talk?" I did not welcome her in. Instead, I entered the hallway, crossed my arms, and leaned against the doorframe. "What do you want, Rachel?" She cringed at my icy tone, but pushed on. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to explain." I let out a sour chuckle. "Explain what? That you lied to me? That you cheated on me? Humiliated me?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I made a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. But it wasn't because I didn't love you. I lost myself. Invisible," I said, my tone increasing. "You had a husband who loved you, who supported you, who gave you everything. And that wasn't enough?" She shook her head, weeping. "I know I was selfish. I know I ruined everything, but I swear it didn't mean anything." "It meant enough for you to end our marriage," I shouted, my wrath rising to the surface. "It meant enough for you to lie to my face over and over again." Rachel extended her shaky hand, but I moved aside, out of her grasp. "Please, Logan," she murmured. "I'll do anything to make it right. I'll go to therapy. I'll earn your trust back. Just don't throw us away." For a brief minute, I hesitated, not because I believed her, but because a little, shattered part of me wanted to think we could repair what was wrong. But I knew better now. Rachel was not the woman I imagined she was, and I was not the guy who could forgive her. "It's already gone, Rachel," I said gently. "You threw it away the moment you decided I wasn't enough. And I can't give you another chance to hurt me." Her tears grew, but I remained strong. "I've already filed for divorce," I said. "You'll hear from my lawyer soon." Rachel's face fell, and I felt a sense of shame. But that wasn't enough to sway my opinion. Without saying anything further, she turned and went away, her shoulders bowed and her footsteps booming across the hall. I shut the door behind her and leaned against it, inhaling gently. The chapter was finally concluded. A month later, Emily and I went for coffee. It seemed weird to see her outside of the tumult of our shared vengeance. She seemed lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "So," she said, swirling her coffee, "how does it feel to be free?" I smiled slightly. "Better than I expected." "And Rachel?" she said, lifting her eyebrow. "Gone," I said simply. "She moved out last week. I think she's staying with her sister in Connecticut." Emily nodded, a hint of pity in her eyes. "And you?" I shrugged, taking things one day at a time, trying to figure out what's next. She looked at me for a minute, then grinned. "You'll be fine, Logan. You're stronger than you think." "So are you," I said. "What about you? Any plans?" She groaned and glanced out the window. "I've been thinking about leaving the city. Maybe start fresh somewhere new, a clean slate." I nodded. "Sounds like a good idea." For a minute, we sat in comfortable silence, two individuals who had been through hell and come out the other side. Emily leaned across the table and rested her hand softly on mine. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." I couldn't help smiling. "Same here. We made a hell of a team." She smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt peaceful. As I went home that evening, the city seemed different. The bustle, the loudness, and the unrelenting speed didn't bother me anymore. I had weathered the storm, and although I was scarred, I was stronger. Revenge had not cured me, but it had given me insight. I knew who I was now and what I deserved. And as I entered my apartment and closed the door behind me, I knew I was ready to start afresh. This time, under my conditions. In the weeks that followed, the city seemed to go on, but I remained haunted by the aftermath of my conflict with Rachel and Liam. The stillness in my flat was no longer suffocating. It was calm, yet it still seemed weird, as if a new beginning had yet to blossom completely. I maintained my distance from pals, avoiding individuals who may have gossiped about my private life. I concentrated on my job, using it to fill the hole and suppress the rage and bewilderment that lingered under the surface. But every now and again, a thought would seep through, like a guilty voice in the back of my mind, reminding me of the misery I had caused. as well as the sorrow left over from Rachel's treachery. The divorce processes were lengthy, difficult, and nasty. Rachel hired the greatest lawyer money could buy, but even the most trained legal mind could not undo the harm she had caused. The proof Emily and I had acquired was undeniable, and no amount of begging could restore the damage. Rachel had attempted to skew the story by portraying herself as the victim. She quickly accused me of neglecting her and emotionally abandoning her throughout our marriage. But the court did not buy it. The text messages, hotel receipts, photographs, and witnesses all revealed conflicting stories. Rachel, once the queen of our social circle, has become a pariah. Her PDA meetings, which used to be filled with phony smiles and judgment, were now like a war of icy shoulders. The murmurs in the hallways were louder than any words she could utter. She attempted to resist, but the reality had taken its toll. In the end, the divorce was completed discreetly. I signed the documents without ceremony, without the catharsis I had anticipated. It was as if the weight of all those years, all the falsehoods, had gradually ground me down to something smaller, lighter. The home was sold, and Rachel was no longer a part of my life, but her presence persisted in the corners of my memory. Emily, meantime, was dealing with her own conflicting feelings. With Liam's career in tatters, the legal consequences of his conduct began to play out. His company distanced itself from him, his reputation suffered, and suspicions of long-standing financial malfeasance started to circulate. Emily's actions dealt Liam a blow he could never recover from. But, as much as Emily relished the feeling of justice that came with his career's demise, she never seemed to be as content as I had hoped. The weight had also stayed with her. As she deconstructed Liam's world, I saw her own unraveling in subtle ways, her quiet periods of meditation, her deliberate pauses before speaking, as if she was waiting for something to settle inside her. Finally, she did what I believed was best for both of us. She departed the city, a clean slate. She packed up, leaving behind the tangled strands of her past with Liam, and relocated to a peaceful life in Northern California. I didn't expect it, but when she made her choice, I understood. She needed it. We both needed it. I had only heard from her once after she departed. It was a brief message. "I am doing great. You're right. It was time for me to go. Thank you for everything. Logan, take care of yourself. You deserve it." That was all. There's no need for further words. The trip that had begun as a method to inflict vengeance on our husbands for the anguish we had endured had evolved into something more. It had evolved into a means of determining who we were apart from the individuals we had previously loved. As the months passed, I allowed myself to heal in ways I hadn't imagined possible. The loneliness was less profound than it had been at first, but it still crept in from time to time. It was at such times that I reminisced about the early days of my marriage to Rachel, the laughing, the dreams, the happy times that seemed so genuine. But those recollections didn't define me anymore. The harm we committed was not about them, but about me. It was about restoring my identity, dignity, and future. Yes, I put myself into work, but I also began to repair the aspects of my life that had been ignored. I began jogging again, something I had not done in years. I attended a couple local events in the city, which I would not have considered previously. I even took a vacation up the coast, seeing locations I'd always wanted to see, but had put off because of a failed marriage. There was comfort in being alone again. The city, too, seemed to provide me some relief. Its unrelenting tempo and continual movement reflected my internal beat. I didn't feel so foreign anymore. I was able to stroll through its streets, cross its bridges, and use the train without feeling like a ghost. The city had its own life, and I had discovered a quiet area where I might start to recover. But it wasn't just the city that aided my recovery. It was the new connections I established. There were no spectacular gestures or sweeping romances, but I met folks with no ties to my previous life. They were new faces in a world that seemed both alien and welcome. Would have beers, go to concerts, and joke about little matters that felt so far removed from the conflicts I'd fought. They had no idea about Rachel, Liam, or any of the memories that tortured me. They just recognized me for who I was now, a guy who had survived a storm and emerged on the other side. But one thing I learned along the process was that I didn't have to ignore my past in order to move ahead. The vengeance, suffering, and devastation had been vital for my recovery, but I didn't have to keep reliving it. The best way to start anew was to leave the ghosts behind, rather than inviting them into my new existence. Rachel and Liam would always be a part of my past, but they would not determine my future. It took many more months before I heard from Rachel again. The communication arrived at a moment when I was finally feeling stable, and I was starting to accept my own pleasure. It was a simple SMS asking whether I was well. There was no apology or explanation. She simply wanted to know whether I was still alive and breathing after all of this. I didn't answer immediately. It took time for me to collect my thoughts. I was aware that what I said might quickly escalate into another argument, another round of unpleasant exchanges. But this time, I took a different road. I just said, "I'm doing well. I'm moving on, and I hope you are too." And with that, I closed the chapter. Life continued to unfold, sometimes slowly, sometimes shockingly quickly, but I was no longer the guy who had been abandoned. I was no longer the guy who wanted revenge. I was a newcomer who had realized that the only path ahead was to embrace the past for what it was and grow from there. The storm had gone, and I had survived it. Now I was prepared to start afresh. The future was wide open, and this time I decided to live it on my own terms. Months passed, and the pain of betrayal started to fade. The stillness in my flat was no longer unpleasant. It had transformed into a type of tranquility I had not realized I needed. Following the divorce, I plunged myself into work, fully immersed in the daily grind. It was a diversion, yes, but it also provided me with structure, something I lacked amid the craziness of the previous few months. Rachel had left my life, and even though she was no longer physically there, she continued to plague me in subtle ways. The rage, the sadness, and even the memories that I had hidden away emerged at unexpected moments. However, with each attempt, I improved my ability to block it all out. Emily had departed San Diego soon after we completed our strategy. I hadn't anticipated it, but I could see why she needed to go. She had cleared the slate of Liam's adultery, but in the process, she had destroyed the world she had constructed around him. It was difficult to start afresh in a place so full with memories, so she packed up and relocated north to begin over. Her message to me was simple: "I am doing great. Logan, take care of yourself." Her leaving didn't seem like the end. It seemed like a chapter ending for both of us. It was bittersweet, but the serenity that followed was genuine. Emily had helped me restore my sense of self. I could never repay her, but I knew she would be well. I also understood I needed to be okay. As time went on, I made the first steps toward recovery. I met new people, people who were unaware of my background. They were unaware of Rachel, Liam, or anything else that had contributed to the devastation I had seen. They just recognized me for who I was now, a guy with scars, but one who had survived. A part of me cherished my anonymity. I could finally be Logan without the burden of the past weighing on me. Then came the text. It came from Rachel. The timing was almost cruel, but I was not shocked. It had been many months following the divorce, and she had contacted me with a simple message: "Are you okay?" There was no apology, explanation, or acknowledgement of the anguish she had inflicted. It was a simple thing, but it affected me more than I expected. I found myself sitting there, gazing at my phone for what seemed like an age. I could have ignored it. I might have banned her phone or left the message unanswered. But I did not. I could not. I wanted actual closure. Not the type of closure that comes from resentment or fury, but the kind that comes from letting go of what was broken and moving on with what remains. I answered with a single line: "I'm doing great. I'm moving on. I hope you are too." That was it. The words were out, and I didn't look back. The mending process was not fast, but with each passing day, I gained confidence in the life I was creating for myself. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was not even about Rachel or Liam. It was about me. I recognized that if I clung onto my resentment and allowed their faults define me, I would never be able to go ahead. I kept myself occupied. I concentrated on my profession, on discovering new things to like, and on reconciling with the world around me. I reunited with old acquaintances, pursued new interests, and spent weekends exploring areas of the city I'd never seen before. Each day seemed like a chance to recapture the parts of myself I'd lost throughout my years with Rachel. In some respects, the silent aftermath of everything was the most painful aspect. After the dust falls, after the pandemonium subsides, you are left with the silence and the awareness that your life has forever altered. But it wasn't as terrifying as I had imagined. The city has also altered. What had previously seemed like a jungle of noise and distractions was now a space of peaceful introspection. I took comfort in the cacophony of the streets and the anonymity of the mob. The disorder that had previously matched the upheaval in my life had become a source of comfort. There was an almost calm quality to the way life went on despite everything. A few months after Rachel contacted me, a coworker called. It was about a promotion, one that would place me in a new job with more responsibility and travel. It was the kind of chance I'd always wanted, and for the first time, I felt prepared for it. No more waiting or hesitating. I was ready to face the future, whatever it brought. The following morning, when I came into the workplace, I had a weird sense of tranquility. I wasn't furious any longer. I was not broken. I had rebuilt myself from the rubble, and now I was ready to live, really live. The storm had gone, and although the wounds persisted, they no longer defined who I was. And maybe it was the greatest win of all. The conflict with Rachel and Liam had taught me something much more vital than vengeance or pain. How to go on. How to start anew by embracing the past and utilizing it to build a better future, rather than eliminating it. I had triumphed not by eliminating them, but by recovering my own life. So that's the tale. Do you believe that genuine healing comes from moving on, or that retribution is required for closure? Share your opinions in the comments section below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe for more.